Good deal. Well, thank you. My name is Alan Donaldson. I'm with CACI. I'm going to introduce the panel here in a second, but before I do that, I just want to talk about kind of why we're here. So across CACI, we deployed kind of GenAI solutions across many of our programs, many of our projects, and we've been using Bedrock quite a bit lately. So really what we want to talk about is really successes of using Bedrock across three main pillars. So the first pillar is internal services. I'm going to wrap back around to that at the end, but essentially something that's been developed for CACI to be used internally. It's not meant to be used externally. And we're going to talk about something called CACI Chat, which was developed really for proposal development. So the idea is it runs on Bedrock, it's on IL4, it's UI certified or accredited, it's used for proprietary information. You upload all of your documents to it, and then from successful proposals in the past, and they can use that to generate a new proposal based on the content that's already won in the past. So we're going to wrap back around to that. That's the first pillar. And the second pillar is around programs. So we actually have representatives here from the Beagle program. So one of our programs, I'm going to let them properly introduce it, but really it's a massive Department of Homeland Security, Customs and Border Protection program. It's very likely the largest, one of the largest, if not the largest, agile development program in the federal space. So over 700 FTEs, more than 70 Scrum teams doing agile development. And so we have Bill Deller and Neha Sagepal here representing that program from the technical side. So Bill is the chief software architect for that program, and Neha is the delivery execution lead. So we can talk both technical and programmatics. And then the third pillar is really around products, something that we've developed internally that we then sell, we license, and we sell outside of the company. And so we actually have Jason Knack here representing our Dark Blue Intelligence Suite. And actually, rather than me introducing what Dark Blue is, maybe Jason, I'll pass it over to you first. Could you just give a quick introduction of really what Dark Blue is and then what gap you're looking to fill with GenAI?
Yeah, so as Alan said, we're head of technology for the Dark Blue Intelligence Suite, and our products investigate and de-anonymize threat actors on the dark web and also deep web spaces. So we do data collection, and then from that data collection, build web-based products, software as a service that enable the investigation into that data specifically for supporting law enforcement and government customers in de-anonymizing and tracking illicit activities. And we also build products that enable safe investigations and browsing in those same environments. So we've been doing this for over 6 years. AI, we've had AI kind of as AI has progressed, right? Natural language processing, modeling, things like that. Generative AI offered a huge kind of multiplier opportunity for us, right? Because we have huge amounts of data. And the big opportunity for us was the dark web is a weird place. The data is massive. And de-anonymizing people that are explicitly trying to be anonymous is very difficult. It's a hard problem. It's hard for our users to do that. The methodologies are unique. Typically, you come into that space as maybe an OSINT analyst, but more typically just a military analyst, a law enforcement investigator. You have a problem you need to solve. You have a mission you need to do. And learning the dark web and our data is not your first priority. It's not what you're expert in. AI allowed us to jump kind of that knowledge gap that every user experiences and turn our complex and massive data into simplified and summarized intelligence reports that any human can read and kind of understand what we're doing, what our data shows, get them to that value point much faster without needing to learn anything, unique methodologies, without needing to spend hours in the tool, without needing to go through 20 clicks. You can just get the report, see the data, and kind of move on with your mission.
Great. I guess as part of that, could you talk about some of the technologies you looked at in adding GenAI to Dark Blue?
Yeah, so we, typically in product development, and that's what we do, typically you would want to start with a problem, a user problem, and then explore that, understand the problem, consider solutions, and ultimately come up with some sort of implementation, right? With this, I think being a good product developer, sometimes you need to break the rules. And in this case, we actually started with the solution. So we are entirely built on AWS. Bedrock came out. And prior to this, we hadn't really looked at generative AI because the methods for building and deploying models was just, it was sort of out of our range for our roadmap. Bedrock came along and made it much easier, where all of a sudden we said, okay, we have this great opportunity. We know that something in this is useful. So we kind of had the solution. Now we had to figure out which of our many problems could we solve best with this. And so, I mean, kind of cheating the answer, right? Bedrock was the solution from the beginning. We knew that was powerful. We knew we wanted to build there. And then the step there was like, what problem do we solve?
Awesome. Well, we'll wrap back around to that, I guess, at the end, because I have another question, a follow-up question to that, but it might be suited towards the end. So I guess, Nehal, let me ask you next. So from the Beagle perspective, could you, similar question, can you give an overview of Beagle, and then what gap you're looking to fill with GenAI?
Yeah, so Beagle is a customs and border protection contract. 700 people, 130 plus applications, and 70 plus Scrum teams. So we support the development as well as sustainment of applications, and I would at a high level categorize into administrative applications like SAP and all the financial data, timekeeping for all our border patrol agents and all. Enforcement applications like tracking the seizures that happen at the border, or assets, all these surveillance cameras that are there at the border. Just we develop as well as sustain those applications. Immigration processing, and then a lot of data analytics like the fentanyl dashboard. It's really handy to have that data right in front of you. So we do all of that, and in this particular use case, and this is just the beginning for CBP, I would say. I mean, CBP has already invested in AI, but for us, this is just the beginning, and our initial use case was around the policy application tool that we already have. And what we wanted to do with that was that border patrol group, they, when an executive order comes in, it can be very tedious to understand what policies are impacted, right? Like how many pages would you have to read through before you understand, yes, this is a policy that's impacted by it. So the Gen AI use case helps us do that. So you feed an executive order, and then it immediately tells you what policies are impacted and the sections of the policy. So imagine the amount of time we have saved by that. And then also we have a chatbot functionality wherein, like, you want to understand what's the policy with the relocation of a minor, and then you have a follow-up question like, what happens with the adults that are accompanying the minor. So instead of reading through pages and pages, you could just ask a chatbot and it will give you the answers because it's driven by all the policy data. And the last use case that we had, a subset of the use case, was around generating draft policy documents. So like I said, this is just the beginning of the whole wave, and we have so many use cases just because of the mission where we can apply AI and save so much time and use that time to keep our borders safe.
Awesome, thanks. And I will ask you later on about kind of next steps, but not right now, so let's come back to that. I love it. And then I guess, Bill, similar question to what I asked Jason. So as part of investigating the technologies, what did the team really evaluate? What technologies did you look at before settling on Bedrock?
Yeah, so Bedrock was kind of an obvious choice for us. So within CBP, the vast majority of the applications that are destined for the cloud already start on an AWS platform. And a lot of the expertise for the people that were involved from a development aspect are very familiar with those technologies. So Bedrock was definitely one of the tools we wanted to look at first. We did have a variety of use cases. Neha mentioned one. With the policy tool, we're also looking at capabilities for like development enhancement, like the previous speaker had discussed. That's a huge area for us that we want to move into. And then also information as far as like data gathering on the applications themselves. So if an executive order comes out, these are the policies that are impacted. But if an executive order or some other query needs to be made, like what application is impacted by this particular change that needs to be made, that was another use case that we wanted to look at. And then Bedrock just became a natural choice from that perspective, just because of the environment within CBP itself, the tools that are typically permitted, and then the expertise for the development staff.
Awesome.
It was just a natural transition into that space.
So I guess following on to that, for the next question really, so as far as challenges, what challenge did you encounter on the Beagle side from the technical, and then Neha, I'll ask you from the programmatic side next.
So challenges, CBP itself has been quite concerned, rightly, because of security implications, leakage of data, that type of information. So they've been taking an extremely cautious approach from that. So the proof of concept that we built we had a use case. We came up with an architecture that we wanted to implement and stuff like that. So we initially implemented within a CACI environment just to move it quicker. And now we're in the process of trying to move it into the CBP environment, and they're now starting to approve certain tools based on they have a technical reference manual that they go through to say that this is permitted, that's not permitted, and that type of thing. So most of it had to do with to make sure that we stayed within the guardrails of what would be permissible. So we did a lot of research to make sure that the tools that we implement, Bedrock being FedRAMP and so forth, the federal FISMA-based system, we need to make sure that we stayed within the guardrails and we did not have to be concerned about any type of leakage, which is a huge concern within CBP.
Yeah, makes sense.
Probably a lot of government-owned spaces overall. So
I would expect most government-owned
yes.
spaces, right? It's like the same question for you, Neha, but from the programmatic side. What challenges did you encounter in getting this deployed out there to a program?
Yeah, I won't call them challenges because I think Bedrock really made it easy for us, but just some constraints, and one of the major constraints was that we, in federal space, there are always expiring funds, and these funds were going to expire at the end of fiscal years. So we just had 7 weeks to stand up this use case and show the power of AI, and that's what we did. So that was a constraint that we had to work in, that we only had 7 weeks, and because CBP did not have approved tools, like Bill said, we did this in the CACI environment, and then we had to gather people from different teams, the corporate support, to make sure they're available and committed to this effort. So just some constraints, but not challenges.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's not a bug, it's a feature, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we, it made it really easy to deliver this finished product, and it's very well received, and we're looking forward to take it forward.
Awesome. And then Jason, I guess similar question for you. So what challenges did you encounter, and how did you overcome those?
Yeah, so challenges kind of start with, I talked about before, we knew the solution, but we had to figure out first which of many problems our users face was best solved by generative AI. And I've worked on both the contracting side of software development, where the customer says, I need ABC, and you just build ABC and then success. And then on the product side, where really it's a greenfield and the choice is yours what to do, and the prioritization problem. And that's its own challenge, right? You've got a great new revolutionary technology. It's going to transform our product, our user experience, people's interaction with our data. You want to make sure that you do it the right way and you implement it correctly, and you don't, you enable users and don't kind of prevent them from doing their jobs. So that was the first challenge, is figuring out what do we do. And we went through some really great brainstorming processes of kind of getting a broad range of ideas from the entire technical team of what could we do? If you just had no constraints and you just were using generative AI, what could we do in our product? And then we narrowed that down and kind of sorted it and got it down to 4 options. And then we broke into a design engineering pairs and drafted, we call them fat marker drawings, basically the equivalent of a fat marker kind of sketching out what a UI could look like. And we did this in our collaborative tools and drew those out and kind of had 4 concepts fleshed out of, okay, we could build this, provide this sort of interface, allow these interactions, and ultimately chose one, and I think we're really happy with it. The second, so that choice problem was the first one, right? Understand what's the right interface for our users to interact with this capability. The other one is accuracy of the responses. So what we ultimately built was a tool that takes our data, takes a record, a piece of data that a user's looking at, makes connections programmatically, just using a normal filtering kind of database search system, grabs associated data, and then sends that to an LLM to summarize, right? And write this Intel report that summarizes a large batch of data that a user might not otherwise see. The trick there is, the nature of what we're doing, dealing with threat actors, supporting law enforcement, supporting investigations, is the data they get back has to be accurate. It has to be factual. It has to represent what was actually there in the environment when we collected it, because they're going to move forward and conduct law enforcement actions or other activities against the data we're providing them. So the risk of hallucination is really great, right? The risk of just bad data, the risk of a bad assessment, anything misleading is sort of critical, a critical failure for our users, and embarrassing and a failure for us. So that was I think the prime challenge for us throughout and continued is everything, we want to use generative AI for all the power it has to create narratives and connections that a user might not find. And at the same time, it has to be 100% accurate and faithful to the data that we have so the user can go and verify and act on, and trust what we're telling them.
Yeah, that makes sense. So as far as you talked about really kind of picking the solution first, right? So you had Bedrock in mind. You wanted to use something, use GenAI directly from Bedrock. If you were taking the different approach, I mean, you just talked about your mission there, and you now know the mission you're trying to solve. Is there anything you would have done differently? And kind of the point behind this question is more lessons learned for people who are kind of getting started on this. Is there a different approach you would take, or I wonder if you could elaborate on that?
So I think my biggest learning, or what I would do differently, is move way faster. The tool that and the product and the feature that we built, I would have, so everything I just said about the challenges and the accuracy and the needs, I think we actually were more scared of where AI could go wrong than our users were. I think generative AI is this sort of global phenomenon, right? Everyone's tracking it, everyone's aware of it, everyone knows it hallucinates, and also everyone wants it. There's a lot of sort of grace and leniency people have for interacting with an AI application if you make it very explicit. This is AI generated, check the answers kind of thing. I think we waited till we had a really polished product and then got it out there and got feedback. And there's still a lot to go, but if I did it again, I think I would have gotten it in front of actual users quicker in a more sort of prototypical state, gotten feedback, let them interact with it, and kind of use that to shape our development even faster.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I guess similar question for you, Bill. So is there anything, any advice you'd offer, anything that you would have done differently?
Actually, I would say a lot of the same thing. So we, within the CBP environment and stuff like that, we have to make sure that accuracy is paramount. We were very concerned about, especially with the chatbot, you would ask a question, you get back something crazy. So curating the data to make sure that it's credible, that this is the information that you want an answer based on. That was a lot of it. We purposely, during the development process, we added some junk articles in to try to see, how it would mix, accurate data with garbage data. We got some truly bizarre responses and stuff like that. So, but it did what we expected it to do in that situation. But I think we moved. I mean, we had a pretty quick development cycle because of the funding constraints that Neha mentioned. But we wanted to make sure that what it fed back was accurate. And that was a huge thing. And then when we released it to the development community, or the testers and stuff like that, so we tracked what questions they answered because we wanted to see, what they asked, what we got back. We asked some crazy questions. Testers really asked some crazy questions. So that was the biggest thing. I think if I was to do it again, move faster and not be so concerned with the credibility of the data. I mean, we went document by document by document by document to make sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's
Yeah,
kind of a trade-off, right? So you get it out there faster or quality, right?
Yeah, since it was in the infancy as far as CBP and interacting with it and stuff like that, I think we were probably overly cautious.
Okay.
So.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then I guess next question for Neha then. What are the next steps for this policy bot within Beagle?
Yeah, so in terms of next steps, the first thing we have to do is move it to the CVP environment. So we have submitted paperwork to get Bedrock approved, and once it's there, then we'll move it to the CVP environment. And we're just waiting for it to happen because there are so many other features that we want to try out, like just improving performance overall, because we just had 7 weeks, so the focus was on getting the proof of concept done. But like features like ability to share the results or ability to download your chat history, or instead of doing single executive order at a time, you could multi-select and let it generate the policies. So there are a lot of features that we have in our backlog, which we are ready to just waiting on that green light to start using Bedrock and CVP environment and get it going, and the power it's gonna give to the users so that they're able to better use their time on more constructive work. So really, really looking forward to what this would uncover for our Border Patrol agents.
Awesome. And then Jason, I guess similar question for you. What's next from the Dark Blue perspective?
Yeah, so next for us is just more. So more connections, more data. And it's a challenge I didn't address earlier, but there's so many connections and so much data to cover that we have. And obviously the more data you can kind of cover and feed to the model to produce intelligence from, the better, the more accurate. So that's kind of the big thing is I think more connections and also deeper, multi-layered connections for us. So making a first level of connection, and then instead of an analyst having to take that first Intel report and then follow the leads to the next step, using LLMs to kind of in an agent model, right? Do that progressive sort of like, here's the first layer of connection, here's the next one, follow the graph sort of all the way down and get, as deep into the intelligence cycle as you can.
Makes sense. And that actually builds off of what we just saw with Ron's presentation as far as moving towards agents. So that was a perfect combination of presentations there.
Up and to the right.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the goal.
Up and to the right. The swoosh. All right. I guess it's the last thing. So I wanted to cover really internal services as well. So I mentioned that kind of at the beginning. And ultimately, the challenges that we encounter with something like CACI Chat, which is our internal chatbot, it's very similar to what they mentioned, especially managing expectations. No matter who the users are, no matter where the funding is coming from, there's always that managing expectation side of GenAI. People expect it to be 100% accurate, and then they like to point out when it's not 100% accurate. So there's that aspect of it. Another thing that came up that I just wanted to throw out there, kind of lessons learned, is something that we did that was very valuable, is when you're working on an internal project, you're often pulling from indirect funding. And so direct funding tends to take priority over indirect funding. You're not going to pull your top resources off of direct to go work an indirect project. So the way that we kind of got around that is we ended up, and this is not an advertisement, I'm not getting paid by AWS, we ended up using AWS ProServe for that. And because it was a 2-month project, it was easy enough to bring them on for 2 months. At that point, it's direct for them, so they're putting top people on it, they're developing it for us, and they transitioned it over to us for ONS, which is a lot easier to maintain moving forward. So now we're kind of looking at that enhancement cycle moving forward, but that was definitely an accelerator to really hit our timeline on that. So let me pause there. Is there anything that we didn't cover that anyone on the panel wants to throw out?
No, I just have a quick input on the CACI chat, and
Yeah.
I'm a user of it, and I cannot tell you how much I enjoy using it because, if you're using ChatGPT or other chatbots, you're always like, oh, is my data at risk? Of course it's at risk, but something that CACI has done, and especially for us who work on proposals, like we're, having that peace of mind that you can actually input something and it's not going to be leaked and it's okay. It really is a great investment, and I can already see the benefits, like, help rewrite this or shrink this or summarize this for me. So really beneficial. And again, there's so much to uncover, and we're just at the beginning of it, I feel.
That's awesome. So I think what I heard kind of across the board is move fast when impossible. And so that's definitely what we did here, and then kind of a lesson learned. Move fast, get it out there, and then iterate on that, kind of the crawl, walk, run mentality that you tend to hear. I guess, Jason, Bill, anything you want to add to that? Otherwise, I think we're a little short on time.
I'll just add one more thing. I think one other thing I would have done differently is the way we integrated generative AI into our app. It's sort of a feature in there, but it's not. It's a feature, and we kind of rely on users to discover it. It's an enhancement. I think if I did it differently, I would have looked at building that capability into more front and center, like right in front of the users, make it the main experience, not an enhancement to the experience. I think it kind of goes to that hesitancy we had around what will users think? Do they want AI everywhere? Is that annoying? And I think some of it's hindsight, but in retrospect, I mean, this whole conference is evidence. Like generative AI is increasingly, it's not just an enhancement to our products; it is the products, and it's more and more like the thing we're using directly. I think we could have gotten ahead of that and just sort of, in some ways, like everything that's been built to date is now in the trash, and generative AI is like the front face to our data, our applications, email systems, processes, everything else. And I think that's just going to continue to increase, and we could have done that.
Awesome. I appreciate it. I guess one last thing I want to throw out, we do have demos for all of this. So if anyone wants to see a demo, come talk to us afterwards and we can arrange something. But I appreciate the time. All right, thank you.